Generally, my process is actually to pick multiple tutors first. So my first lesson is actually an evaluation. Um, not necessarily of like how good a teacher they are, but how good our dynamic is. So that takes a little bit of the pressure off because it's not necessarily that I need to like make huge strides in the language, but I have the different goal of am I able to have some form of a basic conversation with this teacher without switching to English. So for me that's a key thing. So some teachers are um it's more a case of I have to decide, am I eliminating this teacher because maybe I find that their teaching style is they just keep going back to English, and do require a bit of patience if you're talking to someone who's an absolute beginner and they're speaking with a lot of mistakes. There's a certain level of patience there, but I expect that from my teachers. So um, that's kind of what's happening in that first lesson is I'm evaluating, can we get this flow? But then after that, if I have picked a teacher and that and we have let's say a second lesson, then I'm not really overthinking too much what's happening. I kind of find with these lessons, I want the burden to be on the teacher's shoulder. They're the ones who are like, I don't even think of them as a teacher, but as a language facilitator. They are the ones who are guiding me so that we can have a conversation. After the lesson, I'll take a lot more initiative and all the stuff Shannon and I were just talking about in terms of our to-do lists and creating vocabulary and studying. I will definitely take initiative there. But during the actual lesson, I I kind of wipe my hands of responsibility and I let the teacher decide what we're going to do. And it takes so much burden off me because the only thing I want to be worried about during the lesson is trying to speak. I don't want to be worried about what are we going to talk about next? Do I have to think of a new topic or something like this? That is not my problem. That's not what I'm there for. That's the teacher's problem to solve. So the first lesson with a new tutor, I would say your goal is to make it very clear what you want to do with your teacher. So you don't want to just kind of presume they know what you want. I wouldn't immediately write a teacher off just because they spoke English back to me. I would very clearly say to them, as well as I could, or I would warn them ahead of time sometimes, but during the lesson I would say, I really want to not use English. And can you? I appreciate you correcting me on this grammar point, but can we focus more on having a conversation flowing, and maybe you can tell me my mistakes at the end? So I try to give the teacher feedback, and if I have to give the teacher too much feedback, that's a sign that maybe we're not a good fit for each other. But that's what I would suggest for your first tutor is to make it very clear what your learning style needs to be. And if you're following our philosophy, generally that means you're going to have as much conversation in your target language, that this is not really a lesson in the traditional sense where the teacher is like, okay, you zip it for the next hour. And I'm going to go through and just literally read verbatim this chapter of this book that you could have done yourself. That's not a very good lesson. So that kind of dictates what's going to happen. Is I try to make it clear with my tutor. What do you do, Shannon?
My first lesson is very similar to you, so it's an evaluation of the teacher. But what I do going into that first lesson, and I do it for every language, for every new tutor, because it, it's basically like what they say, if you when you go on dates, like you do the same first date with every single person, so that like you can get a sense of different people in the same context. It's kind of the same thing. So what I do in advance is I prepare my introduction, which is like, hi, my name is Shannon. What is your name? I live in California. Where do you live? I'm American. Where are you from? Are you married? I'm married. Do you have kids? I have kids, etc. So like learning like the question and answer, like basically my full introduction, which doesn't need to be super long because if it's a first lesson, um, you won't get through as much as you think you're going to get through. So just like the very basics. And so I will show up to my first lesson with that and see how the teacher deals with me wanting to like work on this and practice this and start speaking and have a conversation about introductions. So My method is very similar to yours, but I have like a specific thing that I bring to each first lesson with a tutor so that I can kind of evaluate them based on my experience with other tutors, what works for me, and then my learning style with that particular person.
Tutors are an important part of learning a language, but you're going to need more resources than just that. My go-to resource is Pod 101, as they have dozens of languages and hours of audio and video, so it's a great way to begin or to keep developing your target language. Sign up using our link to help our channel and get access to loads of free material.